Good morning, this is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Normandy, France. Before we get started, please, above and below, YouTube, SoundCloud, on the article on the China Rising Radio Sinoland website, the article page, please make a donation of any amount, $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, to recognize all my hard work to bring you the truth about what's going on in the headlines and about the Chinese people. This article podcast is at least 10 to 12 hours of work, and I haven't even finished because I haven't produced the video yet. So I would really appreciate it. There's Patreon, there's Fundraiser, there's PayPal. And so please do that before continuing. This is getting uglier by the day. Capitalist Eurangloland is declaring war on communist socialist China because it cannot compete fairly on the world stage. Pictured above, diplomats burning documents at their embassy in Washington, D.C., 7 December 1941, hours after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The next day, President Roosevelt declared war on the land of the rising sun. Here we go. I was writing an article related to this same subject from a different angle, and we'll finish it. But before I do, I just want to put into historical perspective what is going on in the headlines. Global capitalism cannot function without waging endless war. Marx and Lenin wrote about this truism, and they were absolutely right. In the United States, by 1940, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's ambitious New Deal economic plan was losing steam, and the country was falling back into a deep recession after barely limping out of the oligarchy gangster-bankster asset harvest during the Great Depression, when millions of small and medium-sized businesses and people's homes were scooped up by the 1% for pennies on the dollar, not to mention forcing every citizen to sell their gold to the Federal Reserve at $15 an ounce, then turn around and make a windfall profit for the oil banking elites by repricing it at $25 for the same stuff. By 1941, America's dictatorial owners were desperate for a war in order to start another cycle of harvesting the country and its people. What to do? Why, of course, push Japan to declare war on the USA by seizing all Japanese assets in country on 26 July 1941, which were very substantial. Then the following month, Uncle Sam blockaded exports to Japan for petroleum, steel, and scrap iron, almost all of which was being bought from America. That essentially spelled the end of Japan's industrial production. These are diplomatic declarations of war, and Japan did exactly that 4 months later in Hawaii. As Pearl Harbor was smoldering, Japanese diplomats burned all the documents inside their soon-to-be closed embassy in Washington, D.C., pictured above. Does this look familiar? It should. We can go back to 1949 when Eurangloland declared war on newly founded Communist Socialist People's Republic of China via sabotage, blockades, sanctions, and cutting off 1/4 of humanity from conducting commerce and finance around the non-communist socialist world. As I have researched and written about the West Korean and Southeast Asian genocidal wars, they were first and foremost about containing communist socialist China, along with non-stop attempts at color revolutions in Tibet, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong, while using puppet Taiwan as an advanced guard. But from day one, communist socialist China continued its steady march of progress, development, and people's democracy into the 20th and 21st centuries, gaining from strength to strength. You would never know this behind the Great Western Firewall, so read the China trilogy, noted below, for all the fascinating blow-by-blow details. DPRK, or North Korea, in 1953, Cuba in 1959, Vietnam in 1975, Iran in 1980, Venezuela in 1992, and Russia in 2000, also gaining their freedom from global capitalism's brothel of vassal whores, has vastly exposed global capitalism for what it is, a gangster system of piracy, rape, theft, plunder, genocide, occupation, and war, as well as a number of other countries, and I have a hyperlink. Like Japan in the 1940s, China is an existential threat to Eurangloland's dictatorship over the non-communist, socialist, anti-imperial world. Thus, we see history is repeating itself. As China has gotten wealthier, more advanced, and successful around the world, Western post-war hopes of turning it into another balkanized Indonesia, Congo, or Colombia are getting more and more delusional. Not counting Eurangloland's routine 24/7 efforts to destabilize China with psyops, subterfuge, propaganda, fake news, and color revolutions, here is a short list of what the prior has recently done to the latter in hopes of destroying the Chinese people's communist socialist way of life. Notice the rapid acceleration as time goes on. Number 1, 1992 to 2014. 7 deadly attacks in China by U.S.-trained terrorists being sent in from Waziristan, Pakistan, and after 2001 from Afghanistan in support of the West's ongoing color revolution to split Muslim Xinjiang province from the PRC. Number 2, 2003. Likely U.S. bioweapon SARS hits China. Hundreds killed and thousands sickened. Number 3, 2006 to the present. 13 Chinese scientists and researchers have mysteriously died or been arrested in the United States. Number 4, March 2008. The CIA organizes a terrorist attack in Tibet right before the Beijing Olympics to try to get countries to boycott the games like the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. It failed. Number 5, 2011 to the present. Obama's and Hillary's laughable pivot to Asia begins nonstop imperial rooster strutting with U.S. warships sailing and aircraft flying right up to China's territorial waters in the South China Sea, ongoing. Number 6, 2014 to the present. Eurangloland begins its what they called umbrella color revolution in Hong Kong to destabilize China. It slowly petered out and lied dormant until 2019. 12 August 2015, Tianjin port was most assuredly attacked using 2 miniature nuclear bombs with the goal of taking out China's main supercomputer center nearby. If you don't believe me, read my well-researched expose, as well as these photos of the explosions. And of course, my hyperlinks are always in the article on the China Rising Radio Sinoland page. Baba Beijing did not take the bait and hushed up the likely truth to avoid a hot war. 2016, American THAAD, T-H-A-A-D, missiles were installed in occupied Puppet, South Korea, pointed at DPRK and China, as well as Russia. March 2017, ZTE, Shenzhen Tech Company, fined $1.2 billion for bogus charges of violating the United States' illegal sanctions against Iran and DPRK. Number 10, with Donald Trump being selected by the oligarchic deep state to ascend to the White House in January 2017, they had the perfect demagogic actor to pound the war drums. The global stage is set to ramp up Casus Belli against China. Number 11, February 2017, A new strain of H7N9 bird flu hits China, devastating its poultry industry, and it has to buy U.S. poultry products to make up for the shortfall. January 2018 to the present, Trump declares a trade war and unilaterally slaps billions of dollars of tariffs on Chinese imports. More threats and sanctions are piled on over the ensuing months. Number 13, February 2018. A new strain of H7N4 avian flu hits China, crossing over to humans, sickening thousands and killing 600 citizens. China again has to import large quantities of U.S. poultry goods due to the shortfall. June 2018, this is number 14, H7N9 strikes China again unnaturally in the summertime. Millions more of the national flock dies or has to be killed, forcing China to buy even more U.S. poultry products. Number 15, August 2018, China is hit with African swine flu, the same strain that started in Georgia, where it then spread through Russia. Tbilisi, Georgia, is where the United States has its big Lugar, L-U-G-A-R, bioweapon laboratory. This flu spreads like wildfire across the country, very unnaturally, wiping out 40% of the world's largest swine industry. China is forced to import huge quantities of pork products from the U.S. to make up for the losses. Number 16, September 2018, USA sanctions China's People's Liberation Army, the PLA, for buying Russian jet fighters and missile systems. Number 17, 1 December 2018 to the present, U.S. uses its puppet vassal Canada to kidnap Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou based on bogus charges of violating unilateral illegal sanctions against Iran. She is also the daughter of Huawei's founder, communist Mao Zedong adoring Xi Jinping. Number 18, December 2018 to the present, USA begins its pathological attempts to globally sanction and blockade the leading telecommunication and 5G giant Huawei, measures that are spiraling upwards as I write. Scores of other Chinese tech companies, business and government leaders are also sanctioned and ongoing. March 2019 to the present, West's color revolution is taken to a new violent level in Hong Kong with massive destruction of public property, thousands of citizens attacked, and the economy wrecked, aided and abetted by puppet Taiwan. May 2019, China has an unnatural, massive infestation of armyworms across 14 provinces, causing huge crop losses. It has to increase its purchase of U.S. agricultural goods to make up for the loss. 5 August 2019, U.S. declares China is a currency manipulator and an imperial sledgehammer used to extort countries. October 2019, U.S. sanctions 28 Chinese tech companies for doing business in the Chinese province of Xinjiang. December 2019, likely a U.S. bioweapon attack, coronavirus hits China, causing huge economic losses for the people, thousands dying and many more sickened. The Western big lie propaganda machine, the BLPM, moves into high gear to tar the Chinese with the virus, parenthetically Trump's Kung flu ad nauseum, end of parentheses, even though all evidence points to it beginning in the U.S. and or Europe. Number 24, January 2020, Hunan province, where the coronavirus was first detected in China, is struck with a new strain of H1N1 bird flu, causing flock losses and forcing it into more poultry purchases from the U.S. January 2020, Taiwan's re-elected president Tsai Ing-wen is emboldened by the U.S. ignoring its treaty obligations with the PRC, going back to Nixon's history-changing visit there in 1972. She pushes even harder to secede, risking a crippling response from Baba Beijing. Number 26, Australia 2020. I'm sorry, April 2020. Too many A's. Australia loudly pushes for an investigation into the origins of coronavirus while strongly pointing towards China as the culprit. Always ready to bend over 24/7 and happily take Uncle Sam's imperial member in the backside, Aussies risk their economic well-being by precipitating a trade war since 33% of its exports go to China. Yeah, smart. 27. Number 27, 1 July 2020, American puppet vassal UK offers 3 million Hong Kong residents British citizenship. Number 28, 6 July 2020, U.S. sanctions Xinjiang officials and the Provincial Police Department. Number 29, 6 July 2020, Trump administration issues an order to revoke the visas of all foreign students who are only taking online courses due to the imposed coronavirus lockdown. This was clearly meant to target Chinese students since they are more numerous than the next 6 nationalities combined. The negative reaction of U.S. universities was so vitriolic that it was rescinded days later. Or vitriolic, I'm sorry. Number 30, 14 July 2020. Trump is given power to sanction all Chinese officials who supposedly limit Hong Kong's autonomy, end of quote, after Baba Beijing legally passed a security bill that the city never did for the last 23 years and for which it was treaty bound to do so. Number 31, 14 July 2020. Trump signs an order to remove Hong Kong special trade status. Number 32, 14 July 2020. U.S. toady lapdog Britain orders all Huawei 5G equipment to be ripped out of the country's IT infrastructure, delaying cutting-edge telecommunications for years and costing businesses and citizens billions of pounds in increased costs. Go figure! It's pure imperial genius. 16 July 2020. Trump and company begin discussing banning all members of the Communist Party of China, the CPC, from traveling to the United States. Almost 90 million Chinese citizens. Number 34, 20 July 2020. Yankees step in fetch at England, cancels extradition treaty with Hong Kong, making the UK a haven for Hong Kong criminals. 21 July 2020. This is number 35. U.S. Congress passes a law to ban the Chinese social media app TikTok from all government equipment. Number 36. 21 July 2020, U.S. sanctions 11 Chinese companies for doing business in the Chinese province of Xinjiang. Number 37, 22 July 2020, U.S. government gives Baba Beijing 72 hours to close down China's consulate in Houston, Texas, a city with a huge ethnic Chinese population to serve, as well as across southwest USA. Diplomats there are being forced to burn all internal documents to keep them from falling into Uncle Sam's hands. This has not happened in the U.S. since Japan had to do the same thing when the U.S. declared war in December 1941. And finally, number 38, yesterday, July 22nd, 2020, Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. receives bomb and death threats. Trump announces he may close more consulates. This is by no means a complete list. Friends, fans, and followers of China Rising Radio Sinoland, Imperial Eurangloland has extorted and attacked the Chinese people with far more than what the United States did to Japan in 1941. Western global capitalism has been declaring war in China since 1949, but the unprecedented level of aggression is spiraling upward at an alarming rate, especially during the Trump administration. The only reason Baba Beijing has kept its Confucian, Taoist, Buddhist, communist cool is the last thing it wants is a hot war, which would only hurt this defiant independent nation of 1.4 billion citizens and their long-term objectives for the 21st century. Japan was already an expansionist colonial imperial power and had no choice but to go to war against the U.S. in a calculated, Hail Mary attempt to remain Asia's regional hegemon. China has no colonial or imperial DNA in its historical blood and will avoid a military conflict at all costs for the safety and progress of its people. Nevertheless, global capitalists clearly realize that they cannot compete fairly and honestly with communist, socialist, anti-imperialist countries. This has been true since the Russian Revolution in 1917 and explains why the prior has spent trillions of dollars/euros and caused endless wars and occupations to destroy the latter since then, ongoing. China is the reigning heavyweight champion of this group, getting stronger and building win-win bridges of cooperation with anti-imperial and Western ally countries alike via the Visionary Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB, the BRICS Bank, etc. What we are seeing, including the global and likely planned COVID hysteria, is a final, desperate lunge by Eurangloland to push China into a hot war because war is the one economic model that capitalism needs to survive. Ultimately, after 500 years of rape, plunder, theft, and genocide, we are witnessing the final paroxysm of Western colonialism flailing like a wounded lupine vampire. When down, humanity's oligarchs have always been able to keep up their tyrannical dictatorship over us by pulling violently on the levers of war. Will it work this time around? Only China, Russia, Iran, DPRK, Venezuela, and all the other free and independent anti-colonial peoples of the world can stop Eurangloland. Will global capitalism continue to resort to germ, entomological, chemical, and nuclear weapons to maintain its tyrannical dictatorship? Shudder the thought. Based on the spiraling trend upwards, it looks like a cataclysmic confrontation of civilizations between Western evil and anti-imperial goodness may be coming to a head sooner than we think. This is Jeff J. Brown signing out, China Rising Radio Sinoland. Thank you.